Welcome, guys, to the first watch list of the year, the watch list for the week of January 4th. So, last week, if you look on the daily chart, it feels like doom and gloom. We had 4 days of selling, but for the most part, it was a holiday week. There was not much in terms of news events. It was the month end. We are starting off the year new. The index action has to be taken with a grain of salt. Our main condition was as long as the indices hold above the 9-week moving average, things are fine on the larger time frames. For SPY, we clearly held that. For QQQ, it's right there. All right, so we can give it the benefit of doubt, right? The 9MA is at 612.84 and we closed at 613.12. So we still closed above. But this is right on the edge. So this week's we do need to see some action from the bulls. Obviously, right now I have the drawings hidden. I will put them back on soon. Quickly, we look at the yearly chart. Since the breakout in 2023, we have obviously had a very nice run up. The last year, it seemed turbulent, especially in April, but we didn't even pierce the lows of the year before. So overall, a strong bullish trend on larger time frames. Now, how does that stand up to the, let's say, the bias, what we have for 2026? Wall Street analysts are the most bullish they have been apparently since 2007. But the main street, the regular people seem pretty bearish. Like the consumer sentiment right now is close enough to where it was at the worst times of 2008, 2020 pandemic, and so on. So obviously it's a tale of two cities. We have a K-shaped economy, which means the Wall Street is seeing record profits, is seeing great economy, while regular people are struggling with inflation, salaries not increasing, and so on. Usually the sentiment can be divergent and the market finds a way to screw both sides. So just keep that in mind that 2026 can be a bit volatile given the expectations are so far. Yeah, just something to keep in mind. But for now, all we have is we are in a strong bullish trend on larger time frames until that changes with some deep selling. You can't really be too bearish or expect a major crash. Let's go on the monthly charts. On the monthly charts, what we are seeing for the last 4 months is the first consolidation that we have had all the way since the breakout in June. So at the start of the year, we were consolidating last year, had a deeper pullback after Trump tariff shenanigans. Once we recovered that, we held the support area around April. Trump made a U-turn. We recovered that, had a strong push. And now we are getting the first consolidation from that strong push. Usually, these kind of consolidations have one more leg up. If you want to see a last example of that, that was the first push after pandemic. We had this move lower from the pandemic, strong first push. This is the kind of consolidation that we have been in. Funny, I didn't realize that even that time we had an inside monthly candle on QQQ. But you guys can see how strong the next candle was. So this is kind of what it feels like where we are, and that could lead to another leg up, a strong one. So that's my current expectation. Obviously, if we do not hold the weekly 50 MA on larger time frames, everything changes. For the short term, if we don't hold the weekly 9 MA, we get cautious and so on. So just wanted to give some context on the larger time frames because the first weekly watch list before I move to the smaller time frames. The context, by the way, similar for SPY. On the monthly charts, we have a similar consolidation to what we had right after the pandemic too. You guys can see first major push, consolidation, and if it resolves, most likely it resolves higher for another leg up, let's say. So first major push, consolidation, first 9 MA box, and likely resolves up. All right, so we go to smaller time frames, and I'm going to pull back the drawings of the zones that we have had for the last few weekly watch lists. One sec. Let me pause it. All right, so we are back with the drawings, and here we go. So in the last weekly watch list, I had discussed this range with you guys. We had got to this resistance on Friday, did not break above it, and I had mentioned that in the last weekly watch list that the markets can consolidate in this range unless we break through this resistance up. So that's what usually happened in the first 2.5 sessions, right? Monday and Tuesday, we just consolidated in a very tight range. On Wednesday afternoon, into the month end, we sold off. Once we broke below 617.5, that's when the selling started. Our first target was 615. That's where we sold off to on Wednesday. Now, yesterday in the daily analysis, once we were gapping up, I had mentioned how this area from 621.5 to 617.5 is neutral territory. Price obviously tried to break above 621.5, barely stayed there for like a couple minutes, rejected hard. And once we broke below 617.5, we were back down to 615. And after 615 area, we are going to go to our old support around 612, followed by 609. So obviously it was volatile enough where it got all the way down to this support. Now, these support or levels have been in these weekly watch lists for weeks now. So none of that changes. The zones kind of usually stay the same. Price reacts at the same points. So we have filled up this range, obviously had a nice reaction from 609 area, and most importantly, closed above 612, which was key. All right, especially 612 point, the 9 MA. So good signs. As long as we hold above the support next week, the path of there's not much to worry about on larger timeframes. If we break back the support, then we can see some deeper sell-off. We could potentially come all the way to the recent lows that we had in November and maybe even deeper. So ideally, bulls control the support next week, because if they can't, then we have to get out of our long-term investments. We'll have to be careful being in swings. So that's going to be a line in the sand going into next week, because below this, we have this big range that can get filled out. We already had two major reactions there. First on October 10th, you guys can see once we broke the support, that's when we collapsed, and we had another major reaction here 20th November. So we don't want a repeat of that, and ideally this support will hold going into next week. What's the major resistance going into next week? It's obviously 617.5 to 619.4 area. That's also where the hourly 50 MA is. Once we recapture it, we likely go back all the way to 624 area, and above that, the path of least resistance is higher for this gap fill of November 3 to November 4, and 634. So above 619.5, this is the major level of interest, and above that, the path of least resistance is higher to around 634. So those are your levels going into next week for QQQ. What about SPY? For SPY, obviously has had relative strength compared to QQQ over the recent weeks, still safely above the 9-week moving average. Your major support is this one. That's where we reacted strongly on Friday as well. So overall, good signs. Obviously, if this support breaks, then we start to see similar disaster, right? We can start to see a retest of this area around 670, and then below 670, it's a major, major drop all the way to 648 area. So we don't want any of the, especially this support, to give out, because that can lead bulls into some problems. So that's going to be a major level of interest next week. Your immediate resistance is going to be around this area where we got rejected on Friday. So on Friday in the daily analysis, I had mentioned that 684 to 687 is neutral area. Above 687, we can go higher. And you guys can see we got a pretty solid rejection from around 687. Once we broke below 684, there was not much in terms of support. And we went for this gap fill. So far, a very strong reaction from support. Your immediate resistance for next week is going to be this area around 685, 685.2 to let's say 686. If we hold above 686, we can see a retest of resistance here around 688. And then after that, it's a pretty smooth sailing. So let's see how it goes. But this is going to be a major, major resistance of interest going into next week. Probably see some reaction once we test it next week. If we recover it, we likely go back to the all-time highs. So those are your levels for SPY. In terms of context, we have some major news events. We have manufacturing data coming out on Monday. We have NFP on Friday, which is going to be the crucial one. And we also have ADP on Wednesday, which can cause some volatility. So those are your news events for the next week. All right, we have already discussed the levels for the indices and the major events of next week. I will quickly mention futures because there's not much to discuss there. We can discuss some crypto, potentially gold, and then